Perhaps your mother kept one, or your grandmother did, an old tin tucked into the kitchen drawer, sounding like a pocket full of pebbles whenever she lifted it out. Nothing useful was thrown away until she had looked at it twice, and no worn-out cardigan surrendered its buttons without a small ceremony involving scissors. You may remember those buttons being saved, sorted, matched, and sometimes handed to a child who believed, for one quiet afternoon, that she had been given treasure. Tonight, we are going back to the homes where that familiar little habit became part of everyday family life. If you genuinely enjoy these calm journeys through the homes of the past, you are very welcome to like the video and subscribe, and perhaps leave a comment telling us where you are listening from and whether there was a button tin in your family, or one particular button you still remember. And if you prefer to listen with the screen put away, the show is also available on Spotify. Now let us settle beside the old kitchen range, where the kettle is beginning its gentle murmur and the drawer is waiting to be opened. Let the room come back to you, whether it is one you truly knew or one you can easily imagine, the worn table, the clean folded cloth, the scent of soap and warm bread, and a familiar pair of hands that always seemed to know where everything belonged. You can rest here for a while, safe among useful things. Why did a household keep so many buttons when only a few might be needed at any one time? Why did they so often find their way into a kitchen drawer rather than a grand sewing room? How could an ordinary woman tell at a glance which small disc belonged on a shirt, a boot, a coat, or a child's best dress? What stories were carried by buttons cut from clothes that had long since disappeared? And why does the sound of a button tin still seem able to open a door into childhood? Come with me now to a modest English town in the year 1906, on a pale morning when the chimneys are beginning to smoke and the shopkeepers are lifting their shutters. Step quietly through the back door of a narrow brick house, wipe the damp from your shoes, and enter the warmest room in the home. The kitchen is not large. It was never expected to be. Yet almost everything important passes through it. A black iron range occupies one wall, solid and rather commanding, with the kettle set above the heat and a small fire glowing behind its bars. The range must be coaxed, fed, brushed, and understood. It has its moods, as any woman who works with one will tell you. On a cold morning, it can seem like the most welcome object in England. On a busy baking day, it can require nearly as much attention as another member of the family, though unlike the family, it offers no apology when it smokes. Nearby stands a scrubbed wooden table, its surface pale from years of washing. There is a dresser with plates arranged along its shelves, a jug, a basin, and a few cups whose patterns do not quite match. A cloth hangs near the sink. Soap rests in a dish. The room smells faintly of coal, damp wool, toast, furniture polish, and yesterday's onions, all softened by the clean steam rising from the kettle. There may be no kitchen drawer exactly like the fitted drawers of a modern home. In one house, the buttons are kept in a shallow drawer of the dresser. In another, they are in the table drawer, beside string, candle ends, sealing wax, and a pencil worn down almost too far to hold. Elsewhere, the tin lives on a pantry shelf, in a sewing basket, or in the cupboard beneath the stairs. But in this home it is in the kitchen dresser, because the kitchen is where work is noticed and where small repairs are most likely to be made. The tin itself was not purchased as a button tin. Very little in this room was allowed to have only one life. It may once have held biscuits, cocoa, tea, lozenges, or tobacco. Its printed lid has faded at the edges, and the bright picture upon it has been rubbed pale by years of hands. There is a shallow dent near one corner. The lid fits securely, though it gives a small protesting click before it opens. Inside lies a gathering of buttons so varied that no manufacturer would ever have planned the collection. There are plain bone buttons in cream and biscuit shades. There are dark horn buttons, polished smooth. A few shell buttons catch the light with a pearly gleam, white at one angle and pink or green at another. There are sturdy metal buttons from old coats, tiny linen-covered forms, wooden buttons, glass buttons, black buttons for morning wear, and perhaps one painted china button whose delicate flower has survived more years than the garment it once fastened. Some have 2 holes and some have 4. Some have a little shank on the back instead of holes through the face. A few still carry short whiskers of thread, blue, brown, black or white, where they were clipped from a worn garment in haste. One is wrapped in a scrap of paper so that it will not scratch its more delicate neighbours. Another has been threaded onto a length of cotton with 5 matching companions, a sensible precaution taken by somebody who knew that a set was more useful if it stayed together. When the tin is lifted, the contents shift with a dry, cheerful rattle. It is a very particular sound. Not musical, perhaps, but companionable. Anyone who remembers it may feel the years narrow for a moment. The woman opening the tin is called Mrs. Eleanor Webb. She is not a famous woman, and no official history will pause over the way she begins her day. Her name here simply helps us follow a household like many others, built from the ordinary routines recorded in domestic manuals, family recollections, surviving garments, photographs, household accounts, and the objects that remain in museums and drawers. Eleanor is in her middle 30s. She has already cleared the breakfast things, packed a meal for her husband, and sent 2 children towards school after examining ears, collars, cuffs, and hands. The youngest remains at home, seated near the table with a wooden horse and a serious expression. Before the elder boy left, Eleanor noticed that the top button of his coat was hanging by a single thread. That button has brought out the tin. The repair is small, but she does not postpone it. A dangling button has a way of becoming a lost button, and a lost button has a way of vanishing into the street with remarkable determination. If she sews it now, the task may take 2 minutes. If it disappears, she may spend far longer trying to match it. She sets the coat across her lap, selects dark thread, and threads the needle. The button is still present, which is fortunate. She pushes the needle through the cloth from beneath, catches the holes, and works in a neat crossing pattern. The coat is thick, so she leaves enough play in the thread for the button to pass comfortably through the buttonhole, then winds the cotton beneath it to form a small supporting shank. Her fingers know the movement without conscious thought. Down through the cloth, up again, across, back. Pull firmly, but not so firmly that the fabric puckers. This is how much of domestic work is performed, not with ceremony, but with practiced hands. Skill becomes nearly invisible once it is fluent. A child looking on may think that buttons simply return to their places because mothers possess some private arrangement with them. The button tin is not merely a container for replacements. It is a household reserve, a record of past purchases, and a quiet defense against inconvenience. In an age when ready-made clothing is becoming more widely available but garments still represent a significant portion of family expenditure, every usable fastening has value. Clothes are bought carefully, made at home, altered, handed down, turned, patched, and eventually cut into rags. Before the final cutting, the buttons are removed. Not every Edwardian woman follows precisely the same routine. Wealth, region, occupation, household size, and personal habit all matter. An affluent household may send more work to a dressmaker or employ servants who attend to mending. A farm kitchen differs from a London terrace. A lodging house, a miner's cottage, and a suburban villa each have their own rhythms. Some women keep beautifully ordered workboxes with compartments for every notion. Others rely on a paper packet and a chipped cup. Yet the instinct to save buttons crosses many boundaries. A good button is too useful to discard merely because the cloth around it has failed. You can let your eyes close if they wish. The morning will continue without any effort from you. The needle rises and falls, the fire settles softly in the range, and from the street comes the muffled roll of a cart passing over damp stones. To understand why the tin matters, it helps to look at the clothes being worn around it. An Edwardian family is dressed in layers and fastenings. Men's shirts, waistcoats, jackets, trousers, overcoats and undergarments require buttons of differing sizes and strengths. A woman's wardrobe may make use of buttons, hooks and eyes, tapes, laces, pins, buckles, and press fasteners as these become more familiar. Children's clothing is held together by a similarly practical assortment. Even boots may use small buttons, often managed with a button hook. Modern clothing often hides its engineering. A zip closes in a quick motion. Stretch fabric forgives changes in shape. Elastic waits quietly in waistbands. In the Edwardian home, dressing can involve a much more visible system of connections. Each fastening has a job, and when one fails, the whole arrangement may feel the loss. Buttons can be practical, decorative, or both. A humble undergarment needs a washable button that lies flat and causes no trouble. A coat requires something strong enough to bear a pull from cold hands. A fashionable bodice may display buttons that contribute as much to appearance as to closure. Some buttons are covered in the garment fabric so that they blend into the design. Others are intended to shine. A woman with means may purchase a garment whose buttons were chosen to complete its style. A woman working within a narrow household budget may replace a missing one from her own store, accepting a close match rather than a perfect one. If the mismatch is too obvious, she may remove the remaining buttons and substitute a complete set from the tin. This is one reason sets are saved together. 6 plain black buttons may seem uninteresting until a jacket needs 6 plain black buttons. Then they become exactly the thing. Eleanor finishes the coat and gives the button an experimental tug. It holds. The coat is placed over a chair for the boy to wear the next morning, and the needle is pushed safely into a small cushion. She might now return the tin to the drawer, but the youngest child has heard its rattle. He comes to the table. The request is not spoken at first. He simply looks into the open tin with the solemn hopefulness of a person considering a treasure chest. Eleanor knows that expression. She tips a few large, plain buttons into a saucer, choosing those too ordinary to be urgently required, and too large to be swallowed easily. He may sort them by colour while she begins the next task. This kind of play costs nothing, which is one of its virtues. Buttons can become counters, coins, cakes in a toy shop, wheels that have no axle, or guests seated around an imaginary table. Older children may string them, arrange them into patterns, or use them in simple counting games. In some homes, a button strung on doubled thread can be made into a humming spinner, though the success of the performance depends upon patient fingers and a household willing to tolerate the hum. The child in the kitchen sorts white from brown, then changes his mind and sorts large from small. One blue button is declared to be the mare. Eleanor does not ask why. Outside, Edward VII has been on the throne for several years. His reign began in 1901, after the long Victorian era, and the first decade of the new century carries both old customs and new possibilities. Electric light exists, but many ordinary homes still rely on gas, oil lamps, or candles. Motor cars appear on roads, though horses remain part of daily street life. Telephones are known, but most household communication still arrives through conversation, letter, message, or knock at the door. Factories produce clothing and household goods in increasing quantities. Department stores display alluring ranges of fabric and ready-made garments. Sewing machines are well established, and many homes either possess one or have access to the services of someone who does. Paper patterns and women's magazines help spread fashionable shapes and domestic advice. Yet the pace of household use remains careful. Buying something new does not mean ceasing to preserve the old. The button tin belongs perfectly to this meeting of worlds. It contains the products of industry, gathered into a practice far older than the factory that made them. Button making had become a major trade during the 19th century. Birmingham was especially associated with the manufacture of buttons and other small metal goods, while buttons of many materials were produced and traded through wider British and international networks. Machinery allowed large quantities to be made in standard forms, though styles and materials remained wonderfully varied. A button may begin as shell cut into discs and drilled. It may be pressed from metal, shaped from horn or bone, molded from glass, turned from wood, or formed from one of the newer manufactured materials. Vegetable ivory, made from the hard nut of certain palms, was used for buttons because it could be carved and dyed. Casein plastics, based on milk protein, appeared around the turn of the century and would become another useful button material. Celluloid offered colour and imitation, though it also required care because of its flammability. Eleanor does not need to know the industrial story of every button she holds. She knows them by behaviour. This pale one survives washing well. That ornate metal one may stain delicate cloth if left damp. The shell button is pretty but can chip. A cloth-covered button belongs on a bodice, not on something destined for boiling water. The thick bone button will suit drawers or a work shirt. The small black one may replace a missing fastening on a glove or dress cuff, if the size is right. Her knowledge is practical rather than labelled. It rests in the fingertips. She can feel whether an edge is rough enough to cut thread. She notices whether the shank is loose, whether the holes are worn, whether rust has begun beneath the surface, and whether a button is too heavy for the cloth. She understands that a buttonhole strained by a large button may tear, while a button too small may slip free at an inconvenient moment. Such judgments rarely enter ledgers, yet they save time and clothing. A household runs upon thousands of them. By 9 o'clock, the kitchen has moved into its longer morning rhythm. Beds have been opened to the air. Ashes have been attended to. Water has been carried or drawn, depending upon the house. Floors need sweeping, surfaces wiping, and food preparing. On washing day, the routine becomes heavier, warmer, and wetter. The button tin will matter again then, because laundry tests every fastening. Washing in an Edwardian household can take much of a day and involve preparation before the main work begins. Clothes are sorted according to fabric, colour, and the treatment they can endure. Water must be heated. Soap is shaved or worked into the cloth. White cottons and linens may be boiled in a copper where facilities allow. Garments are rubbed, rinsed, wrung, perhaps put through a mangle, and carried to the line or spread where they can dry. The air fills with soap steam. Damp fabric drags at the arms. Wooden pegs knock together in an apron pocket. The kitchen windows mist, and small rivers of water find their way across surfaces, no matter how carefully the work is managed. Before washing, an attentive woman checks garments for damage. A tear often grows larger in vigorous handling. A loose button may be torn away by rubbing or caught in the rollers of the mangle. Delicate or valuable buttons can sometimes be removed before laundering, particularly if there is reason to fear damage. More ordinary garments go through with their buttons in place, but they emerge for inspection. After drying, a shirt may return without one fastening. A child's underbodice may have a cracked button. A pillowcase closure may need attention. The tin opens once more. It is tempting to imagine that women of the past spent every spare moment sewing with serene satisfaction beside a spotless window. Domestic photographs and advertisements encouraged such pleasing scenes. Reality was more varied. Mending could be satisfying, irritating, sociable, lonely, skillful, hurried, or all of these in the same basket. A button sewn on during daylight is easy enough. A button required at 7:30, when a child is meant to be leaving and the thread refuses the needle, can test the gentlest disposition. Edwardian mothers did not possess an extra supply of patience merely because their photographs were taken in long skirts. Still, the repair was made. Sometimes a button was attached with thread chosen to disappear. Sometimes the best available cotton was slightly wrong in colour, and the coat went out into the world just the same. The important thing was that it fastened. If you are growing drowsy, you may leave the washing to the capable hands in this kitchen. Listen only to the softer sounds: water dipping from cloth, the low hiss of the range, the smooth wooden rhythm of the mangle turning, and the small tap of a button against the side of a basin. By midday, the room smells of boiled fabric and the beginnings of dinner. The youngest child has tired of sorting buttons and built a road from them instead. Eleanor gathers the pieces back into the saucer, checking the floor as she goes. Buttons have a talent for rolling into corners where they remain until discovered by a broom, a boot, or a bare foot. She returns them to the tin, but not carelessly. The most useful white buttons go toward one side. A small packet holds black hooks and eyes. A safety pin keeps several dark coat buttons together. Not every woman sorts her collection, and not every attempt at order survives family life. Some tins are wonderfully arranged. Others are a democratic jumble. The jumble itself can be useful. Searching through it allows the hand to compare sizes. Buttons are spread across the table, turned face upward, and assessed in natural light. The right one may not be identical, but it should agree in diameter, thickness, colour, and purpose. A slightly different shade matters less on a concealed undergarment than on the front of a best coat. When there is no match, ingenuity begins. A button can be moved from an unseen place to a visible one. The bottom button of a long garment, where it is less likely to be noticed, may replace one missing near the face. A complete set can be changed. Two similar styles can be alternated deliberately, making necessity appear decorative. A covered button can be recovered in matching cloth. A plain fastening can be hidden beneath a fold or trim. Dressmaking manuals and women's publications offered instruction, but much knowledge travelled from woman to woman. A girl watched her mother, a younger sister watched an elder, a domestic servant learned from another servant or from the mistress of the house. Neighbours exchanged methods while exchanging news. Skills settled into the memory through repetition. Eleanor first learned to sew on a button before she could make a neat buttonhole. The button was the simpler task, and useful enough to entrust to a child. Her mother gave her a square of old cloth, a blunt needle where possible, thick thread, and several large buttons. The first attempts sat crookedly. One was so firmly sewn that the cloth bunched beneath it like a drawstring purse. Her mother unpicked it without fuss and showed her again. "Leave a little space," she explained. "A button must not be strangled." The phrase remained. Many practical instructions do. They survive because they are vivid, and because somebody said them in a familiar voice. By the time Eleanor was old enough to assist with household sewing, she had learned to begin and finish thread securely. She knew that a knot alone might pull through loose fabric, and that several small stitches could anchor the work. She learned to reinforce a strained area from behind, and to place the button in line with its fellows, rather than merely covering the nearest hole. She learned that buttonholes reveal workmanship. Hand-worked buttonholes require care, evenly spaced stitches, and an edge that will withstand repeated use. Machine-made buttonholes would become increasingly common, but hand sewing remained important in home dressmaking and repair. A well-made buttonhole is a little piece of architecture, holding the cut cloth together while permitting constant passage. She also learned to save the tiny envelopes of spare buttons supplied with some garments, and to rescue good fastenings from clothes that could serve no further useful purpose. This rescuing often happens at the end of a garment's long career. Imagine a wool dress purchased or made some years earlier. At first it was kept for best, worn to church, visits and family occasions. As fashion changed and the fabric softened, it became suitable for ordinary wear. The skirt might be altered, the bodice adjusted, the cuffs renewed, and the most worn places mended. Eventually the cloth became too thin or damaged for the dress to continue as a dress. But it did not simply enter a rubbish bin. The better sections might be cut for children's clothing, a smaller bodice, patches, slippers, or household uses. Woolen scraps could be saved for a rug or cushion filling. Cotton fabric might become dusters, polishing cloths, bandages for ordinary household needs, or patches. Before the scissors divide the garment, trim, hooks, eyes, tapes and buttons are removed. You can almost hear the small snip of scissors now. Eleanor sits near the window in the later afternoon, where the grey light is still adequate. Across her knees lies an old brown bodice no longer fit to wear. She cuts each button free, taking care not to damage the shank. The thread falls in short curls. 6 buttons collect in her palm, warm from handling. The fabric remembers the shape of use. There is a faint shine at the elbows, fading near the seams, and a darker line where a fold protected the dye. The garment may have been present at birthdays, Sunday dinners, a school concert, and ordinary evenings when nothing notable happened at all. Most clothing witnesses far more ordinary time than special occasion, which may be why it becomes so intimate. Eleanor does not pause to narrate its history. She has work to do. Yet she does smooth the cloth once before cutting it. The buttons go onto a thread together. A knot secures the ends, and the little set drops into the tin with a muted clack. Years later, perhaps, they will appear on a girl's jacket. Nobody seeing them there will know the first garment they served. The buttons will know, if buttons are permitted such knowledge. This is part of the tin's quiet charm. It holds continuity without requiring an account. A large brass button may have come from a grandfather's coat. A dainty pearl one may remain from a baby's gown. A pair of jet black buttons may have been purchased during a period when dark clothing was required or preferred. A carved button may be the sole survivor of an otherwise forgotten dress. Memory attaches itself unevenly. One woman remembers every origin. Another remembers none, and values the buttons entirely for what they can do next. In families with military connections, uniform buttons may be kept separately as mementos rather than mixed into general use. Buttons bearing insignia or distinctive designs can carry identity and service in a way a plain shirt button does not. School, livery, railway, postal, naval, and other occupational buttons may likewise be recognizable. These are not always destined for the next cardigan. Some are saved because their meaning exceeds their usefulness. The household tin may therefore border upon an archive, though nobody calls it one. Museums preserve elaborate buttons as examples of craftsmanship and fashion, and collectors admire unusual materials, makers' marks, portraits, crests, and designs. Yet the kitchen tin preserves another kind of history. The plain button polished by repeated fastening, the scratched one that spent years beneath an apron, the cheap white disc used until its holes wore thin. Ordinary objects are often most eloquent about ordinary life. The afternoon deepens. School children return, bringing cold air, damp hems, slate pencils, and information that seems extremely urgent. A boot button is missing. A cuff has come loose. Somebody has exchanged a marble for something regrettable. Bread and dripping, jam, or another simple meal appears according to the household's means and habits. The kitchen fills with voices. Eleanor's elder daughter, May, is old enough to assist. Her school may include needlework among the skills considered appropriate and necessary for girls. Educational arrangements vary, but sewing is widely taught. especially with practical household usefulness in mind. Girls practice stitches, seams, hemming, darning, patching, and the making or mending of garments. May does not always greet practice with enthusiasm. She prefers the part where the finished object exists. This evening, Eleanor places the boy's boot on newspaper and asks May to search for a suitable button. Buttoned boots can require a specialized hook to draw the small buttons through narrow openings. The fastenings need to be strong, smooth enough to pass through, and reasonably uniform. A missing boot button is not replaced by the first pretty object that catches the eye. May spreads a cloth on the table and tips out a portion of the tin. The cloth keeps buttons from rolling and softens their sound. She searches among dark pieces, rejecting one that is too large, another with a weak shank, and a third that looks right but is made for cloth rather than leather. Eleanor watches but does not immediately interfere. Learning requires the chance to choose wrongly in a safe place. At last, May finds a small black metal button close enough to its companions. The repair itself may require sturdy thread, waxed for strength, and a firm needle. If the leather or fastening is badly damaged, the boot may need professional attention from a cobbler. Household skill has limits, and Edwardian families rely on a network of local tradespeople: boot repairers, tailors, dressmakers, laundresses, ironmongers, bakers, and many others. Mending at home is not a belief that everything can or should be done alone. It is a way of handling what can be handled, preserving money and time for what cannot. Eleanor shows May how to test the button's position. The girl presses her lips together in concentration, a strand of hair slipping toward her cheek. The kitchen lamp is not yet lit, but the day is fading. They must finish before the stitches become difficult to see. Needlework depends upon light. Before bright electric lighting became ordinary in homes, women learned to arrange fine work near windows and reserve coarser tasks for evening. Oil or gaslight can illuminate a room, but shadows gather around dark thread on dark cloth. Eyes tire. Perhaps this is why the window seat appears so often in memories of sewing. It was pleasant, certainly, but also practical. If your own eyes are tired now, they need not follow the needle. Let the scene soften. You can hear the family without seeing every face, and you can rest while the old kitchen moves gently from afternoon into evening. The lamp is lit. Its glow warms the dresser and catches briefly on the shell buttons still scattered over the cloth. The range is attended to, dinner is served, dishes are washed, and the table is cleared once more. The boot sits repaired near the hearth, where it can dry without being scorched. After the younger children are settled, Eleanor returns to the mending basket. The basket is distinct from the button tin, though the two work together. It contains stockings with thin heels, a shirt needing attention at the cuff, an apron tie pulled loose, and perhaps a child's garment waiting to be let down. There is thread, darning wool, a thimble, scissors, needles, tape, and scraps for patches. The volume of mending depends upon household size and circumstance, but it is rarely absent. Clothes experience hard use. Children grow. Men's working garments wear at knees, elbows, pockets, and cuffs. Women's skirts collect mud at the hem and strain where work requires bending and lifting. Underclothes and household linens endure frequent washing. A button is often the quickest item in the basket. This makes it almost welcome. Darning a large heel takes time and attention. Replacing a button can be finished before the kettle boils. There is satisfaction in the small completeness of it, a loose object returned to order, a garment made ready, one task closed. The thimble catches the lamplight as Eleanor works. It protects the finger that pushes the needle through heavy cloth. Thimbles may be plain steel, brass, silver, bone, or other materials, ranging from humble tools to decorative gifts. The household thimble is shaped by use, known so well that another may feel oddly wrong. Scissors, too, are treated with respect. Good, sharp scissors should not be used for paper if they are intended for cloth. Many families remember a mother or grandmother guarding the dressmaking shears with a firmness that left no room for negotiation. The kitchen might belong to everyone, but those scissors had a queen. Thread is saved and purchased with purpose. Cotton thread comes in different strengths and colours, wound on wooden reels. Silk thread may be used for finer work. Linen thread serves where firmness is required. Wax can help strengthen thread and reduce tangling. A needle case or packet keeps needles together, though a stray needle in an upholstered chair has always been a persuasive argument for tidiness. The button tin, by contrast, tolerates disorder. It receives what the household gives it. A detached button found while sweeping is placed on the mantel until someone identifies it, then dropped into the tin. A neighbour returns a borrowed pattern and brings 2 spare buttons that might suit the brown coat. A child finds a shining metal button near the gate and presents it as though it were a sovereign. A worn shirt yields a row of white buttons on the day it becomes cleaning rags. The collection grows by inches and accidents. Because buttons are small, their individual cost may be modest, but matching matters. Local drapers and haberdashers sell buttons in many forms, often attached to cards. A woman may take a garment or sample of fabric to compare colour and size. Shop counters display reels, tapes, pins, needles, hooks, elastic, lace, braid and buttons, all the little components upon which finished clothing depends. A visit to the draper can be practical and pleasurable at once. Imagine entering the shop on a clear morning. A bell sounds above the door. The interior smells of cloth, polished wood, paper, and perhaps a trace of damp from customers' coats. Bolts of fabric stand in ordered ranks. Drawers behind the counter hold goods too numerous and small to display freely. Boxes are lifted down. Cards of buttons are spread beneath the light. Eleanor has brought a piece of navy cloth. She needs enough buttons for a jacket she is remodelling for May. The shop assistant offers several choices. One set is handsome but too expensive. Another is cheap but looks weak. A third is plain, dark, and well suited to the fabric. Eleanor turns a button between finger and thumb, examines the back, and considers how it will look after months of use. Fashion enters the decision, but so do washing, wear, and future reuse. Edwardian fashion is often remembered through the elegant silhouette of wealthy women. High collars, shaped bodices, long skirts, sweeping hats, lace, and carefully arranged hair. Such images are real, but they are not the entire wardrobe of the period. Ordinary women adapt fashionable lines according to means and daily necessity. A dress for housework cannot trail impractically through ashes and washing water. Aprons protect garments, sleeves may be managed for work. Older clothes serve for dirty tasks, and best clothes are guarded. Buttons help transform and update. A row of new buttons can freshen an altered bodice. Decorative buttons can draw the eye away from a seam introduced during remodeling. A plainer set can make an older garment suitable for everyday use. When changing styles affect the line of a jacket, buttons may be moved to alter the apparent shape. A skilled dressmaker understands that the eye follows repeated details. A homemaker with good judgment often knows the same thing, even if she never uses the language of design. May is allowed to choose between 2 affordable sets. She favours the shinier one. Eleanor prefers the set likely to withstand wear. There is a brief, quiet negotiation familiar to mothers and daughters in every era. They purchase the durable buttons. On the walk home, May looks again at the packet and decides she likes them after all. This is convenient, though not wholly unexpected. Objects often improve once they belong to us. The old buttons removed from the jacket will not be discarded. They are cream-coloured and still sound. Eleanor clips them free, threads them together, and places them in the tin. The new set is sewn on carefully, each button aligned with a marked position. May tries on the jacket while the final threads are secured. The result is pleasing, not new exactly, but renewed. That distinction lies at the heart of much household management. The aim is not always to replace. It is to restore usefulness, neatness, and confidence. A garment that fits well and fastens properly feels settled on the body. A child sent to school in a mended coat is not wearing a domestic lecture. She is simply wearing a coat ready for the day. Buttons also participate in the family calendar. In spring, heavier clothes are brushed, repaired, and put away. Moths must be discouraged, storage kept dry, and garments folded with care. Missing buttons are best replaced before storage, because 6 months later, nobody will remember where the original was placed. Lighter clothes are brought out, examined, aired, and altered for children who have lengthened unexpectedly over winter. Children always seem to grow most when a garment has just been finished. A hem can be let down if enough cloth was allowed. Tucks can be released. Sleeves can be extended with cuffs. Buttons can be moved to give a fraction more room at a waistband or bodice, though there are limits to what optimism and 1/4 inch can achieve. Summer brings lighter cottons, washing dresses, pinafores, and garments suited to warmer work. White or pale buttons are called upon frequently. They knock against wash basins, survive soap, and dry in sunlight. Some turn chalky with age. Others develop a mellow cream colour that no new packet quite reproduces. In autumn, coats return. Buttonholes are checked. Heavy fastenings are reinforced. School clothes are prepared. A missing button discovered on the first cold morning creates unnecessary haste, so the careful household looks in advance. Winter gathers everyone toward the kitchen fire. Sewing becomes evening work. Dark fabric absorbs lamplight, and fingers grow dry in the cold. The tin is opened beside cups of tea, its contents spread on a cloth while wind brushes the windows. Christmas may bring a small sewing gift, new needles, a pretty pincushion, a silver thimble if means allow, or a workbox for a girl beginning her own collection. Buttons themselves sometimes decorate handmade items or cards, though useful ones are not squandered thoughtlessly. A child might receive a homemade garment whose bright buttons provide its chief ornament. The button tin changes with the seasons but never empties. A few pieces leave. More arrive. Its contents reflect the colours that pass through the household: sober blacks and browns, school navy, apron white, infant cream, a hopeful green, a faded red. Fashionable colours appear in modest fragments long after the dresses themselves are gone. Patterns also shift. Late Victorian garments overlap with Edwardian ones at the start of the reign. Through the first decade of the 20th century, silhouettes and details change. The very straight, narrow fashions that emerge around 1910 differ from the fuller shapes associated with the earlier years. Yet home wardrobes change gradually. Most families do not replace everything when a fashion plate alters its mind. An older dress may be restyled. Trimming can be removed. Sleeves can be reshaped where fabric permits. A bodice can be adapted. Buttons are moved, replaced, or reused as part of that work. Fashion arrives in the kitchen by way of cloth scraps and small decisions. Eleanor sees elegant women pictured in newspapers or magazines. She notices shop windows. May observes what teachers, neighbours, and better-dressed classmates wear. They are not isolated from style, but they translate it into the language of their own lives. A dramatic hat in an illustration may become a more modest ribbon arrangement. An ornate line of buttons may become 5 plain ones carefully spaced. A fashionable jacket may be suggested by altering an existing garment rather than buying a new one. The button tin participates without complaint. It has never objected to being slightly behind fashion. There is another reason for keeping it near the kitchen. This room is often the domestic centre of communication. Family members enter and leave through it. Clothing damage is spotted as coats are taken off. Children are washed and examined here. Laundry passes through. Parcels are opened. Old garments are cut down. Small objects found in pockets are emptied onto the table. The kitchen drawer becomes a place for items that must remain close at hand, but do not warrant a room of their own. String is there because parcels and bundles require tying. Matches are there because fire is daily work. A pencil is there because orders and sums must be written. Candle ends wait because they can still give light. The button tin belongs among these things because repair is not a special event. It is part of the ordinary maintenance of life. In a larger middle-class home, the geography may differ. A mistress might keep a well-furnished sewing room or work table, while a maid undertakes routine mending in the servants' quarters or kitchen. Household linen may be inspected systematically. Buttons and tapes could be stored in labelled drawers, boxes, or baskets. Domestic service remains a major form of employment for women in Edwardian Britain. A young maid may spend long hours cleaning, carrying, serving, and attending to clothing. She might be expected to sew on buttons and make simple repairs, with finer work performed by a more experienced servant, the mistress, or an outside dressmaker. In such a home, buttons can reveal rank and role. Livery buttons may identify a household. A maid's print dress requires practical fastenings. A lady's gown may carry decorative buttons that are part of an elaborate design. A gentleman's wardrobe includes shirt studs, waistcoat buttons, braces buttons, and coat fastenings, each attended according to custom. Yet when a button comes off, the gesture required is wonderfully democratic. Someone must find needle and thread. The person doing so may be the wearer, a wife, a mother, a sister, a servant, a tailor, or a dressmaker. Men in occupations requiring self-reliance may know basic repairs, and boys can be taught. Still, routine family mending rests heavily upon women's labour, expected so commonly that it often passes without comment. The finished repair also passes without comment when it is done well. Nobody praises the button that holds all day. Nobody notices the cuff that does not gape, the waistband that stays closed, or the boot fastening that survives the walk to school. Success is quiet. The tin is full of preparations for these unnoticed successes. You may rest with that soft kitchen quiet for a moment. The family has gone to bed, the lamp is turned low, and only the range gives an occasional settling sound. In the drawer, beneath its faded lid, every button waits without urgency. Morning returns. It is now market day, and the kitchen wakes earlier. Eleanor dresses in the cool bedroom, fastening her clothes by touch where practice permits. Clothing the body in the Edwardian period takes time, especially when layers, laces, tapes, hooks, and buttons must all be managed. The exact arrangement varies by class, age, activity, and fashion, but dressing is generally less swift than pulling on a modern knitted top and fastening a zip. Her underclothes are practical and washable. A corset shapes and supports according to the conventions of the time. A bodice and skirt, or a dress, follow. The high neckline suitable for day wear is secured. An apron will protect the garment during kitchen work, then be changed or removed before she goes out. Small fastenings can be difficult at the back. Women assist one another, develop flexible methods, or use garments designed with reachable closures. Hooks and eyes are common where a flat, close fastening is desired. Buttons remain useful where strength, decoration, or ease of replacement matter. A button hook may lie in the bedroom rather than the kitchen drawer. With its slim metal hook and handle, It draws the tiny boot button through its opening. The motion looks effortless when practiced. Without the tool, a tightly buttoned boot can be troublesome. Eleanor sits, places her foot firmly, and works upward. Hook, pull, release. Hook, pull, release. The boots are polished, but not new. One crease across the toe has darkened. They will carry her through wet streets, market mud, and a morning of standing. Their buttons are checked almost unconsciously. A missing fastening outdoors cannot always be managed with a safety pin, though many a safety pin has been asked to perform heroic temporary service. Before leaving, she opens the kitchen drawer to take a piece of string for her basket. Her hand touches the button tin. It is a small reassurance, no more considered than knowing where the salt is kept. At the market, household economy becomes visible in another form. Eleanor compares prices and quality. She handles vegetables, assesses eggs, and considers the joint or cheaper cut that may feed the family. She knows which foods will stretch, which leftovers can become another meal, and how much fuel a dish requires. These are cousins to the judgments made over buttons. Both depend upon understanding materials, anticipating use, and wasting as little as possible. A home is not kept by one grand act of management. It is kept by repeated decisions too small to seem important alone. Should the weak button be repaired now or tomorrow? Can this cloth bear another patch? Is the fire hot enough to bake while water heats? Will the child need the larger coat before spring? Can the worn sheet be turned sides to middle, bringing stronger fabric to the place of greatest wear? Is there enough thread of one colour to finish the seam? The woman making these decisions carries an internal map of the household. She knows what is in drawers, what is nearly finished, what has gone missing, what can be substituted, and what must be bought. The button tin is one tiny district on that map. When Eleanor returns, she brings groceries wrapped in paper and tied with string. The string is unknotted rather than cut where possible, wound into a small coil and stored. The paper may be smoothed for another use. This economy is not necessarily a grim performance. It is habit, common sense, and sometimes even pleasure. There is satisfaction in finding that an old thing still has work left in it. Modern households often keep a drawer of miscellaneous objects, batteries of uncertain strength, keys to forgotten locks, spare picture hooks, takeaway menus, tape, pens, and a single screw that looks important. The Edwardian drawer is less electrically mysterious, but the family resemblance is clear. It holds possibilities. The afternoon brings a visit from Eleanor's neighbour, Mrs. Clark, who carries a child's red woolen coat over one arm. The coat is sound, but 2 buttons are missing, and a third is cracked. The original set is unusual, with a raised pattern around the edge. She has searched her own stores without success. The women spread the coat across the table and open Eleanor's tin. Tea is poured. The youngest children occupy themselves near the hearth, and the search begins. This is a social use of household stores that is easy to overlook. Neighbours lend patterns, swap scraps, share tools, recommend tradespeople, and exchange spare notions. One woman's unmatched buttons may complete another woman's set. A ribbon too short for an adult garment may trim a child's bonnet. A remnant left from curtains may patch a concealed place. The objects move through relationships. Eleanor finds one button close in size but not in design. Mrs. Clark finds 2 that might serve if all the originals are removed. They compare 4 dark buttons, then 6 brown ones. The red coat seems to prefer brown. It does not say so naturally, but women who sew learn to interpret these silences. At the bottom of the tin lies a card holding 5 black buttons, too severe. Then May remembers the old brown bodice, cut apart several weeks earlier. The 6 cream brown buttons are still tied together. Against the red wool, they look warm and cheerful. The women place them along the front, spacing them by eye. The coat changes at once. What began as a repair begins to resemble an improvement. Mrs. Clark smiles. The buttons are accepted, perhaps in return for a few white shirt buttons from her own supply next time. No formal account is kept. This kind of exchange strengthens domestic resilience without calling attention to itself. It also allows tastes and techniques to circulate. A neighbour may show a better way to cover a button, reinforce a pocket, or clean a particular material. News travels alongside instruction. Tea cools. Children listen while appearing not to. If you remember women talking over sewing, you may remember the sound more than the words. Scissors laid down on wood, thread pulled through fabric, a cup returned to its saucer, the low rise and fall of familiar voices. You can drift with those voices now. There is no need to follow each stitch. The red coat is becoming whole again, one quiet button at a time. Button covering deserves a closer look because it turns plain forms into exact matches. A button mold, often of wood or another firm material, can be covered with a small circle of fabric. The cloth is drawn neatly around the form and secured at the back. The finished button blends with the garment, useful for dresses, bodices, and coats where a coordinated appearance is desired. The work requires attention to the direction of patterned cloth. A stripe placed crookedly will advertise itself. A floral motif can be centered. Thick fabric needs enough allowance to fold without creating a bulky ridge. Fine material may need support. Commercially made covered buttons are available, and dressmakers produce them, but home covering extends the possibilities of what is already at hand. An old button can sometimes serve as the base. A new scrap gives it a new face. This practice carries a small lesson in Edwardian appearance. Frugality does not necessarily mean indifference to beauty. Women working within limited budgets often care deeply about color, proportion, neatness, and finish. The very effort spent matching buttons shows that usefulness and attractiveness are not enemies. A patch can be carefully aligned. A darn can be made nearly invisible. A row of buttons can be spaced evenly. An apron can have cheerful trim. A pie can be marked with leaves cut from pastry scraps. Practical homes still make room for grace. The button tin itself may be pretty because its first life was designed to attract a buyer. Biscuit and confectionery manufacturers used decorated tins that remained desirable after their contents were eaten. Floral designs, royal portraits, landscapes, children, animals, and ornamental lettering could all appear on packaging. Repurposing such a tin brings color to a working drawer. Its picture may become associated less with the original product than with the objects stored inside. A child who never saw the biscuits may forever call it the lady tin, because a lady in a broad hat is printed on the lid. Other containers serve just as well. Wooden boxes, tobacco tins, jars, cloth bags, and old tea caddies all become homes for buttons. The container is chosen because it closes, fits the space, and is available. A deep tin allows abundance, but makes matching slower. A shallow one spreads the contents. A clear jar displays colors, but may not protect delicate pieces from light or breakage. The classic mixed tin survives in memory because it appeals to several senses at once. The weight surprises the hand. The lid scrapes. The buttons cascade. Cool glass, warm wood, hard metal, and smooth shell meet beneath the fingers. Some carry a faint scent of the drawer, dry wood, dust, soap, lavender, or fabric. The tin also contains hazards modest enough for sensible management. Small buttons must be kept from babies. Rusty pieces can mark cloth. Sharp shanks can prick. Celluloid items should be kept away from flame. A cracked glass button can cut thread or finger. The Edwardian kitchen, with its open fire and busy surfaces, requires care. The tin is opened at the table, not balanced on the range. Needles are counted or returned to their cushion. Scissors are closed. Children are supervised according to age and temperament. There is always one child who can be trusted with a saucer of buttons, and another who regards every small object as an invitation to scientific experiment. Eleanor knows which is which. As May becomes more capable, she is allowed to take the tin alone. She repairs her own school cuff, though the first replacement is the wrong size. The button is too small and slips through the hole. Eleanor waits until May discovers the problem herself, then helps her select another. The lesson is gentle but lasting. A repair must work in motion, not merely look finished on the table. May moves her arm, bends her wrist, fastens and unfastens the cuff. The second button holds. Growing competence changes a girl's place in the household. She can contribute to mending, care for younger children's clothes, and begin preparing articles for her own future use. Some girls make samplers or practice pieces. Others sew practical household linens and garments. The amount and quality of instruction vary widely, as do personal interest and talent. One girl loves fine embroidery but dislikes plain mending. Another makes firm, serviceable repairs and has no wish to decorate anything. A third can calculate exactly how much fabric is required, yet spends 10 minutes searching for the thimble on her own finger. Human nature did not begin with modern distractions. For many women, marriage brings the establishment of a separate household store. Needles, thread, tape, fastenings and buttons accumulate gradually. A mother may give her daughter useful pieces. A grandmother may pass down a workbox. Friends may contribute to a trousseau or household preparation. Old tins move with their owners. Thus, a button collection can predate the kitchen that houses it. Imagine May years later, lifting the faded tin from a packing crate in a new home. She recognizes the dent in the corner and the lady on the lid. Inside are buttons from her childhood coat, though she may no longer know which they are. She adds new ones from her husband's worn shirts, and, in time, from her children's clothes. The collection becomes layered. This is one reason dating a family button tin can be difficult. Its contents may span decades. Victorian pieces sit beside Edwardian ones. Later plastics join shell and bone. A button saved in 1906 might remain untouched through the First World War, the 1920s, another war, and well into the kitchens remembered by living generations. The tin is not a sealed Edwardian object. It is a travelling household. But before it travels so far, let us remain in 1906 and follow Eleanor through another ordinary week. Monday may be associated with washing in many households, though routines differ. Tuesday can bring ironing and further drying. Baking, cleaning, shopping, black-leading the range, scrubbing steps, polishing, and mending must all find places around meals and childcare. Domestic manuals propose orderly schedules, but weather, illness, visitors, school needs, and a temperamental fire rearrange them. The home is run by rhythm rather than perfect obedience to a timetable. Ironing requires heated flat irons or box irons, changed as they cool. The irons must be clean, the heat tested, and fabric protected from scorching. A little wax may be used according to method. The kitchen grows warm. Starched garments require care. Buttons can complicate pressing because the iron must move around them without cracking, imprinting, or melting delicate materials. A woman learns to press from the wrong side where appropriate, to use a cloth, and to avoid bringing a hot iron down directly upon raised buttons. Metal can become dangerously hot. Shell can break. Covered buttons can flatten. The iron glides, pauses, lifts. Cloth exhales steam. Eleanor spreads a shirt across the table. She irons between the buttons, then works around each one. A modern iron can move lightly with a controlled thermostat and steam at the touch of a control. Her iron demands more judgment. Heat is estimated by experience, sometimes tested on a spare cloth or by bringing the hand near without touching. Too cool and the work is ineffective. Too hot and a mark can appear in a moment. The shirt's buttons are plain and sturdy. One has begun to loosen after washing. Eleanor notices because the iron nudges it sideways. She lays the shirt aside. Later, while the next iron heats, she reinforces the stitches. This is preventive mending, the least visible and often the most efficient kind. A loose seam caught early may need only a few stitches. A weak button secured now will not be lost. A thinning heel darned before it opens requires less work. Household care is full of these small interventions. They resemble tending a fire. A little attention at the right moment prevents a larger labor later. After ironing, clothes are aired before being folded away. Dampness trapped in fabric encourages unpleasantness. Shirts are folded. Collars and cuffs are treated according to their style. Detachable collars and cuffs, particularly in menswear, allow heavily soiled parts to be laundered separately and replaced. Studs may hold them in place, adding another set of tiny objects to manage. Studs are cousins of buttons, but may have their own box, dish, or compartment. Collar studs, shirt studs, cufflinks, and other fastenings require organization. A missing collar stud on a workday morning can cause remarkable activity for an object so small. Eleanor keeps such items in a bedroom dish, but stray pieces still reach the kitchen. Pockets emptied before washing yield coins, string, nails, pencil stubs, folded papers, and once, to her displeasure, a piece of toffee wrapped inadequately. A trouser button may be found there too. Men's clothing places heavy strain on certain fastenings. Brace buttons must be secure. Trouser flies use buttons. Waistcoats require neat rows. Work jackets need strength. A wife who maintains her husband's clothing learns which points repeatedly fail, just as he may learn which gate hinge sticks or which floorboard complains. Domestic partnership is often expressed through repairs made without discussion. Eleanor sews a brace button with doubled thread and reinforces the cloth beneath. She does not choose a decorative pearl button from the tin, tempting though the image may be. The sturdy dark button wins. Her husband notices only that his braces fasten. That is enough. On another day, the repair concerns a baby's garment. Here the choices become gentler. Buttons should be smooth, secure, washable, and appropriately placed. Rough edges and loose fastenings are unacceptable. White pearl or bone buttons are commonly suited to fine infant garments, but the exact materials depend upon what the family owns and can afford. Tiny clothes may be beautifully sewn. Even households with little spare money often invest care in baby linen, whether newly made, borrowed, inherited, or adapted from older fabric. Fine tucks, narrow hems, and small buttons show the scale of the wearer. An older sibling's garment may be remade for a younger child, with new buttons restoring freshness. Family photographs sometimes reveal clothing shared and adapted across ages, though photographs themselves often capture best dress rather than the full everyday wardrobe. Eleanor holds a little garment near the window and tests each fastening. The smallest button in the tin lies against her fingertip like a pale seed. She rejects it because one hole has cracked, another is sound. She sews it firmly, checks the back for rough thread, and passes her finger over the finished work. Care is measured in touch. Many women would recognize this movement a century later, rubbing a seam between finger and thumb, checking whether a label scratches, feeling the temperature of bath water with the wrist, smoothing a blanket beneath a sleeping child. The tools change, the hand remains observant. The kitchen clock marks the hour. Outside, a street seller calls. Somewhere nearby, a door closes and a dog answers. Eleanor folds the garment and places it in a drawer lined with paper. The rejected cracked button does not return to general use. It may be discarded or kept briefly if its material can serve another purpose, but sensible thrift does not mean preserving every useless thing forever. Women decide when an object has reached its end. This point matters because the button tin can look indiscriminate to an outsider. It is not necessarily a hoard of rubbish. A practiced keeper periodically removes rusted, broken, or dangerously sharp pieces. What remains is potential. The threshold between useful and useless is judged according to circumstance. A chipped decorative button may still be suitable for a child's game. A single ornate button can close a purse or decorate a hat. Two matching buttons may serve cuffs or pockets. One strong button can replace a hidden fastening. A set of 3 might suit a small child's bodice. Quantity changes purpose. A lone glove button is not enough for a long row, but it may answer somewhere else. The woman looking into the tin does not see only what each button was. She sees what it might become. This habit of imaginative reuse extends throughout the home. Fat is rendered or reused according to cooking practice. Bones and vegetable trimmings may contribute to stock where suitable. Stale bread becomes crumbs, pudding, or toast. Ash, cinders, paper, jars, bottles, fabric, and string each have possible second lives. Not everything is reused and practices vary, but the household is accustomed to materials moving from one purpose to another. The button is especially suited to this circulation because it separates cleanly from cloth. It is designed to be attached, removed, and attached again. Unlike a seam, it can migrate. One might call it the small traveller of the wardrobe. A dark button begins on a woman's mantle, spends several years in a kitchen tin, then appears on a boy's school coat. Later, it is removed once more and used on a cushion cover. Its surface grows smooth. The original moulding blurs. The thread colour changes from black to brown to green. No written record follows it, but the household does. If you are nearly asleep, you can allow the years to move in this gentle way, without dates to remember. A button leaves one coat and enters another. A child grows, a hem comes down, the seasons turn around the kitchen table. The Edwardian years themselves pass. In 1907 and 1908, new goods continue to appear in shop windows. Advertising reaches households through newspapers, magazines, posters, catalogues, and packaging. Manufacturers promise convenience, cleanliness, fashion, and modernity. Ready-made clothing becomes increasingly important, though fit, quality, and availability differ. The presence of cheaper mass-produced goods does not immediately end home sewing. Instead, women combine purchased garments with alteration and repair. A ready-made blouse may need adjustment. A child's coat may be bought larger to allow growth. A factory-made shirt still loses buttons. Indeed, more clothing can mean more buttons to save. Sewing machines speed certain tasks but do not eliminate handwork. A machine can construct seams rapidly, yet buttons are often attached by hand in the home. Hand finishing remains necessary. Threading, pinning, basting, turning, pressing and fitting continue around the machine. A treadle machine brings its own domestic sound. The rhythmic motion of feet, the soft mechanical whir, the needle striking in steady sequence. It may stand in a parlour, bedroom, kitchen, or other available space. When not in use, its table can become another surface for household life. Eleanor does not own the newest model, but she has a dependable machine. May works the treadle too quickly at first. The fabric races. Eleanor teaches her to slow the rhythm and guide rather than pull. For button work, They return to the hand needle. May is remodeling a blouse. She marks the button positions with tailor's chalk and measures the spacing. Even gaps create calm visual order. The top fastening must sit properly at the high collar, where strain would be noticeable. The buttons are small and light, chosen from a card purchased at the draper's. The extras go directly into the tin. This is another way collections grow, not only from old clothes but from unused spares. A project requiring 8 buttons may involve the purchase of a card holding more. The remaining pieces are retained because the fabric may later need a replacement. A wise woman may stitch a spare button discreetly inside a garment. More often, it joins the household store and risks losing contact with its original companions. Threading matching pieces together helps, so does leaving them on the card. Paper cards in the tin become bent and soft at the corners. Printed wording fades. A needle may be pushed through one for safekeeping, though this can create a prickly surprise. Tiny packets are folded and unfolded. The tin acquires layers of paper among the hard pieces, muting its rattle. At the very bottom lies lint. Every useful container eventually develops a little weather of its own. The blouse is finished. May wears it on Sunday, and Eleanor notices that the 3rd button sits slightly out of line. She says nothing until they return home. Then they move it. There is kindness in choosing the right moment for correction. Sunday clothing receives special care. Best garments are brushed, aired and stored. Buttons are polished where appropriate, though polishing methods must suit the material and avoid damaging surrounding cloth. Metal buttons can tarnish. Some garments use protective guards or careful cleaning techniques to prevent marking. For church or visiting, appearance is read closely. Clean collars, sound gloves, polished boots, and secure fastenings contribute to respectability. This does not mean every family achieves an immaculate ideal. Mud exists, children fidget, weather has its own opinions, but preparation matters. The evening before, clothing is laid out and examined. A missing button discovered then can be replaced calmly. The same discovery on Sunday morning, while the family waits at the door, turns the button tin into a box of suspense. Eleanor has learned to check early. She examines her own dark jacket. One button has developed a pale scratch. It is still sound, and she leaves it. Not every imperfection requires action. A garment may show age without looking neglected. The distinction is subtle and important. Care does not erase use. It allows an object to continue with dignity. A polished wooden table retains knife marks. A mended sheet carries a seam. A repaired coat may show where cloth was turned. The Edwardian home is not an untouched display. It is a place where things bear evidence of service. The button tin is perhaps the clearest example. Its contents are valuable precisely because they have already belonged somewhere. As the decade approaches its end, May becomes a young woman. Her clothes change, and so does her relationship to fashion. She pays closer attention to collars, sleeve shapes, trimmings, and the exact character of buttons. A plain fastening can seem too old-fashioned. A decorative one can make a garment feel current. Eleanor remembers feeling the same at that age. They negotiate between taste and purse. Sometimes May wins because the difference in cost is small and pleasure matters. Sometimes Eleanor wins because the garment must survive daily use. Often they find a third choice neither had first considered. The draper knows them by sight. On one visit, he shows them buttons made to imitate more expensive materials. Industrial production has become skillful at creating appearance through molding, coloring, coating, and pressing. A button need not be carved from a costly natural substance to suggest elegance. May chooses a modest set with a dark luster. When sewn onto her jacket, they catch light without shouting for attention. The old set enters the tin. Eleanor is beginning to find that some buttons in the collection have been there as long as she can remember. She turns over a large, mottled one and recognizes it from her mother's workbox. Its material may be horn or an imitation. She never asked. It has travelled from her childhood home into this one. She does not use it, although it would serve. Sentiment influences usefulness. A button can be technically available yet privately reserved. It may remain because touching it recalls a dress, a person, or a room. Many family tins contain such pieces, never displayed as heirlooms, never thrown away, and never selected for repair. Their purpose is simply to remain. The border between tool and keepsake is soft. A silver thimble might be openly treasured. A fine workbox might be inherited with its story intact. A button, less obviously precious, hides among ordinary companions. This modesty protects it. Nobody thinks to sell it, frame it, or divide it formally. It stays in the drawer. When hands search for a black coat button, they brush against memory. Perhaps that is why opening an old button tin can feel unexpectedly intimate. The buttons are not merely examples of design. They were touched at moments of departure, dressing, undressing, nursing, work, celebration, and growth. Fingers fastened them in darkness, cold, hurry, and contentment. A child tugged one while being carried. A bride's sleeve closed with another. A tired man loosened his waistcoat after supper. A girl buttoned her first grown-up jacket and checked herself in the glass. Not every imagined scene can be proven for any particular button, of course. But the physical closeness of buttons to daily life is undeniable. They sit where fabric parts and must be joined. They help a garment conform to the moving body. They are touched repeatedly, then forgotten completely when they work. This repeated touch polishes material. It also makes the object familiar enough to be recognized years later. A woman may identify a button from a childhood coat, even when she cannot clearly picture the entire coat. Shape survives where context fades. The tin offers memory in fragments, which is often how memory arrives. A colour, a click, a cold, smooth surface in the palm, the smell of a drawer, a mother wetting thread between her lips before guiding it toward the needle, a grandmother saying that the right button was certainly there somewhere. And somehow, eventually, it was. You can stay in that searching moment as long as you like. The buttons move softly under the hand, and the kitchen beyond them grows hazy and warm. There is nothing urgent here. Now the calendar reaches 1910. Edward VII dies in May of that year, and George V succeeds him. The strict historical Edwardian era ends with the king's reign, though in everyday social history the label is sometimes used more loosely for the years before the First World War. Households do not change their habits when a period receives a new name. The fire must still be lit, meals must still be made, buttons must still be sewn. Eleanor hears the news as part of the wider nation's life. Mourning customs, public ceremonies, shop displays, and newspaper reports mark the transition. Clothing conventions around mourning vary by relationship, social expectation, means, and personal choice. Black garments and accessories remain familiar, though the elaborate mourning practices associated with earlier decades have changed over time. The button tin contains black buttons ready for practical use. Some are dull and plain. Others imitate jet or carry faceted surfaces that reflect small points of light. True jet, glass, molded materials, and other black substances can all appear in dress ornaments and buttons, though not every shiny black piece is what a seller or family memory later claims. Eleanor chooses carefully for a dark bodice. The buttons need not be grand, they must agree. Black dye can make old fabrics difficult to match, as shades shift with wear and light. A button slightly different in blackness may be more noticeable than expected. She lays several candidates upon the cloth and carries them to the window. Daylight tells the truth. She selects 5, and replaces the entire front row rather than tolerate one obvious stranger. The removed buttons are tied together. Back into the tin they go. This cycle continues beyond reigns and fashions, yet changes are coming more rapidly. Women's clothing in the early 1910s moves toward narrower lines in some fashionable styles. Blouses and skirts remain central to many wardrobes. Tailored suits are important. Fastenings continue to include hooks, eyes, buttons, and newer forms of press fastener. The zip exists in development, but has not yet become the universal household solution it later seems to be. Buttons remain everywhere. Ready-to-wear garments expand. Mail-order catalogues bring choice to people beyond large shopping centres. Sewing machines improve. Synthetic and semi-synthetic materials grow in significance. But the domestic logic of repair holds. A manufactured garment is still cloth joined by thread. Thread still breaks. May, now employed for a time before marriage or helping more substantially at home depending upon her circumstances, carries a small emergency sewing packet. It contains a needle, a little thread, perhaps pins, and one or two useful buttons. Women may keep such supplies in bags, desks, or workplace drawers. A button can fail away from the kitchen. Temporary solutions are familiar. A safety pin closes a gap. A brooch conceals a missing fastening. Thread is improvised. The proper repair waits until evening. When May returns home with a cuff pinned together, Eleanor notices at once. The tin comes out before supper. Mother and daughter work side by side. No longer teacher and small pupil, but two competent women comparing options. May prefers to reinforce both cuffs, because the second button is also weak. Eleanor agrees. Their movements are similar. Each winds thread around the small shank in the same way. May learned the gesture by watching, but she has made it her own. This transmission is difficult to date. There is no single afternoon when all household knowledge passes from one generation to another. It travels in portions. How to hold cloth taut, how to turn a collar, how to remove a stain, how to judge bread dough, how to calm a fretful child, how to pack a drawer so that lavender reaches the linen without marking it. Some instructions are spoken, others are absorbed through presence. The button tin encourages both. A child asks what something was used for. A mother explains the difference between shell and bone as she understands it. A grandmother remembers a coat. A girl learns to match size by laying one button over another. Even silence teaches. The child sees that useful things are cleaned, sorted, and kept. She sees that repair happens before replacement. She notices that hands can solve small problems. Not every daughter continues every habit. Some reject the old tin as clutter. Some prefer ordered cards and labelled boxes. Some become busy in work that leaves little time for mending. Some enjoy sewing more than their mothers ever did. Tradition is not a command. It is an available thread. By 1911, census records show the enormous variety of women's work, both inside and outside homes. Women are domestic servants, textile workers, shop assistants, laundresses, dressmakers, teachers, clerks, farm workers, factory workers, and much more, while many married women's unpaid household labour goes broadly described rather than measured in detail. The button tin can appear in any of these lives. A dressmaker keeps sorted boxes of buttons as professional stock. A factory worker handles them in bulk during production. A servant replaces them on an employer's clothing. A laundress curses the ornate kind that cannot withstand treatment. A shop assistant sells them by card or count. A mother repairs school clothes after paid work is finished. The same object means inventory, component, duty, economy, beauty, or memory, depending upon who touches it. In button-making districts, Women and children historically participated in parts of production, though conditions and methods varied by place and period. Buttons passed through many hands before reaching the draper's counter. Shell had to be cut and shaped. Metal was stamped. Materials were drilled, polished, dyed, mounted, sorted and packed. A card of 6 neat buttons conceals an industrial chain. Eleanor sees the finished card. She judges its value through quality and price. She may never know the town, workshop or factory responsible, yet her domestic work completes the button's journey. Manufacture creates potential, sewing gives it a place. Then years of fastening test the maker's promise. Good buttons become trusted. Poor ones crack, rust, lose their coverings or pull free. Women remember which kinds disappointed them. Advice circulates. A draper who wishes to retain customers pays attention. Consumer judgment belongs to domestic skill as much as cooking or sewing. Housewives influence what succeeds through countless purchasing decisions, even when public histories pay more attention to inventors and firms. The kitchen drawer quietly records those decisions. The durable buttons survive long enough to be saved. Inferior ones disappear. This produces a curious distortion in old tins. Their contents may suggest that all earlier buttons were wonderfully strong, when in fact the weak examples were less likely to remain. Survival is a form of selection. The same is true of many household objects. The jug in a museum is the one that did not break. The quilt is the one that was valued or lucky enough to be kept. The recipe written down is only one among many held in memory and lost. The button tin preserves fragments, not the whole. Even so, the fragments tell us a great deal. They show available materials, colours, sizes and styles. Thread remnants can suggest reuse. Wear reveals handling. Sets tied together imply organisation. Mixed decades reveal continuity. The container shows repurposing. Most of all, the tin shows readiness. A household expected things to require attention. This expectation was not gloomy, it was practical. Cloth wears, children grow, fastenings loosen. If the needle, thread, and replacement button are available, the interruption remains small. There is comfort in prepared hands. You may feel that comfort as the evening settles again. Nothing has to be perfect. It only has to be tended, one small task at a time, while the kettle breathes and the fire glows low. In 1912 and 1913, Eleanor's household continues through familiar days beneath a changing world. Electric services expand unevenly. Public transport, newspapers, cinemas, consumer goods and communication shape modern life. Homes absorb novelty according to location and means. May hears music from a gramophone in another house. A neighbour speaks of new labour-saving equipment. Catalogues show ranges and fittings that would transform a kitchen if money and infrastructure allowed. Yet modernity arrives piece by piece, not as a complete new room delivered overnight. A home may contain a sewing machine, a modern manufactured stove, an old wooden dresser, and a button tin inherited from the previous century. Ages coexist in drawers. This mixture often survives today. A digital clock may stand beside a grandmother's mixing bowl. A modern washing machine cleans a hand-embroidered cloth. New batteries share a drawer with keys older than the door. Households are natural museums without intending to be. In Eleanor's kitchen, the newest object is admired for a week and then expected to work. The oldest objects have passed that test many times. The button tin receives no admiration. It simply continues. One evening, the lid no longer closes properly because the contents have risen too high. Eleanor tips everything onto a cloth and sorts the collection. This is a rare full review. The spread is magnificent in its humble way. Hundreds of circles, ovals, domes, and shapes cover the table. Dark pieces gather like seeds. White ones resemble small sweets, though nobody should make that comparison in front of the youngest child. Glass catches the lamp. Metal flashes. Wooden buttons sit warm and matte among colder materials. Eleanor and May begin by removing broken pieces. A rusted fastening is wrapped and discarded. A glass button with a sharp chip goes out. A few scraps of thread are shaken free. Matching sets are threaded together. White shirt buttons fill a small inner tin. Special buttons are wrapped in paper. As they work, origins return. These came from the green dress. Those belonged to Father's old waistcoat. Here is one from May's red childhood coat, though Mrs. Clark's child wore the remade set, and the history becomes tangled. A tiny pearl button may have come from a baby gown. Nobody is sure. Stories are accepted even when uncertain. Family memory does not always seek the standards of an archive. I think this was your aunt's may be enough to preserve affection without proving identity. Historically responsible telling asks us to distinguish certainty from possibility. But at the kitchen table, possibility has its own warmth. The sorting reveals duplicates they had forgotten. A needed coat set appears. Several unattractive buttons are retained because they are strong. Beauty is considered, but usefulness keeps its vote. At last, the reduced, ordered collection fits the tin again. The lid closes with a satisfying snap. For several weeks, everything remains organized. Then a child returns 3 buttons to the wrong compartment. A packet tears, and ordinary disorder resumes. This too is part of the tin's life. Perfect systems rarely survive contact with a family. The summer of 1914 begins, and then the wider world changes with the outbreak of the First World War. For a sleep-safe journey, we need not dwell upon the heavier events beyond the kitchen walls. It is enough to say that households encounter uncertainty, separation, altered work, shortages that develop over time, and new demands upon women's labor. The habits already learned become useful. Clothes are maintained carefully. Knitting and sewing support family and community needs. Women take on expanded roles in employment and voluntary work. Household stores matter. Buttons continue to be salvaged, exchanged, and reused. Military uniforms bring buttons with distinct designs and associations. Some enter family keeping as mementos. Others remain attached to garments preserved long after their active use. A uniform button can carry powerful personal meaning, and many are kept apart from ordinary household stock. Eleanor's tin may receive one wrapped in cloth. She does not use it on anything else. During and after the war, the older rhythm of home life changes but does not vanish. May's generation lives differently from Eleanor's in some respects. Hemlines, silhouettes, employment patterns, domestic technology, and social expectations continue to shift. The 1920s bring new fashions and increasingly visible modern materials. Buttons adapt easily. Art Deco shapes and colors join plainer forms. New plastics become more common. Garments use fewer or differently placed buttons in some styles, yet coats, blouses, underwear, children's clothes, and household items still depend upon them. The tin broadens its vocabulary. A bright early plastic button lands beside bone and shell. Its color is more uniform, its shape crisp. Eleanor turns it over with interest. The new does not automatically displace the old. They rattle together. May, now with a kitchen drawer of her own, may favor a biscuit tin from the 1920s. Its printing is fresher. She transfers some of her mother's buttons into it, or perhaps receives the entire older tin later. Her children sort them at the table just as she once did. The ritual repeats, though nobody announces it as tradition. A cardigan reaches the end of its life. The wool may be unravelled if suitable, or used in another way. Before anything else, the buttons are cut free. One child asks why. Because they are still good, May says. That may be the whole philosophy of the tin. Still good. Not precious in the formal sense. Not rare, not fashionable, simply capable of doing useful work again. Through the economic pressures of later decades, the habit proves its worth. During the Second World War, clothing rationing and the campaign to make do and mend give official language to practices many women already know well. Garments are altered, repaired and preserved. Buttons are removed before cloth is repurposed. Household stores become especially valuable. By then, the Edwardian button tin may already feel old-fashioned, but nobody minds. Its contents include several generations of materials. A woman reaching into it in the 1940s may draw out a button older than she is. She may sew it onto a child's coat with no idea that Eleanor once cut it from a brown bodice under the grey light of 1906. The domestic past continues without a label. After the war, new clothing, new fabrics, and household prosperity in many families gradually change habits again. Washing machines become more common over time. Zips and synthetic fasteners take larger roles. Ready-made clothing becomes cheaper and more abundant. Home sewing remains popular, but is no longer equally necessary for everyone. Yet the button tin survives. Women who no longer make entire wardrobes still replace missing buttons. Spare buttons arrive in tiny packets attached to new garments. Children still need emergency repairs. Cardigans still shed fastenings. A coat bought from a shop still benefits from its buttons being reinforced if the factory stitching is weak. And old habits carry emotional weight. A woman who grew up during scarcity may save every usable button long after she can afford replacements. Her daughter may tease her fondly, then bring over a coat for repair. A granddaughter may play with the tin on rainy afternoons. Colours and textures become part of family memory. The original Edwardian reasoning shifts from necessity toward reassurance, craft, and affection. By the 1950s and 60s, kitchen drawers contain new materials. Plastic buttons arrive in cheerful colours: cherry red, mint green, powder blue, sunny yellow. Novelty shapes appear for children's clothes. Mother of pearl and older natural materials remain mixed among them. The sound of the tin changes slightly, though only a keen ear would say how. Television may now glow in the next room. The kitchen has different fittings. The range may have given way to a gas or electric cooker. Packaged foods and modern cleaners occupy cupboards. But a mother still sits at the table in the evening, needle in hand, saying that she will sew the button on now before it gets lost. She may be Eleanor's granddaughter. The tin has acquired another dent. Perhaps this is the version you remember, not the 1906 kitchen itself, but its descendant, a laminated table rather than scrubbed wood, a radio playing softly, a tin that once held toffees, a mother wearing spectacles for close work, a grandmother pouring the buttons into your palms and warning you not to lose the little pearl ones. You may remember choosing favourites. The best button was not necessarily the most valuable. It might be a large red one, a clear glass one shaped like a jewel, or a brown button with a carved flower. Some looked like tiny shields. Some resembled sweets. One might have a metal loop on the back that made it stand oddly in the hand. Children turn buttons into categories adults never consider. Happy buttons, serious buttons, buttons fit for queens, buttons that plainly belong to bears. The tin becomes a toy only because an adult first preserved it as a tool. Its emotional life expands. In later decades, when inexpensive clothing makes replacement easier, the habit sometimes fades. A missing button may condemn a garment that could be repaired in minutes. Sewing is less commonly taught in some families. Modern schedules make small tasks feel strangely difficult to begin, yet spare buttons still gather. They arrive sealed in plastic bags, stitched to care labels, or tucked into tiny envelopes. We put them in drawers intending to remember which garment they match. Years later, we hold one up and recognize nothing. The modern button collection is often more mysterious because garments leave quickly while spares remain. An Edwardian woman might also forget an origin, but she was more likely to see potential beyond the original match. A black button was not only for the coat it came with, it belonged to the whole household. This flexible view is one of the quiet skills embodied by the old tin. To use it well, you need knowledge of materials, scale, color, strain, laundering, clothing construction, and human impatience. You need to estimate whether a child will tolerate the fastening, whether a man will pull it too hard, whether a heavy coat requires reinforcement, and whether a delicate button will survive the wash. You need decent light and a needle suited to the cloth. You need to know when a close match is close enough. That last skill may be the most useful of all. Household work rarely offers perfect materials, perfect timing, and perfect conditions. There is often only the best available solution before school, work, church, bedtime, or the next wash. A slightly mismatched button firmly attached may be better than a perfect button that exists only in a shop closed for the evening. Eleanor's competence lies partly in accepting this without lowering her care. She does not waste 20 minutes seeking an invisible difference on an undergarment. She does take time to align the buttons on May's best jacket. She understands where exactness matters and where usefulness is enough. This is judgment, not merely thrift. The same judgment seasons soup without measuring spoons, tests an iron without a thermostat, judges whether a feverish child is settling, and knows which visitor needs tea before conversation. It is built through years of attention. The button tin sits at the intersection of all these household arts because it is small, ordinary, and repeatedly needed. It also reminds us that domestic history is not confined to architectural plans, famous designers, or luxury interiors. It lives in drawers. A house can be understood through where it keeps its string. A family can be glimpsed through the wear on its chairs. A woman's work can be traced through the objects placed within easy reach. The kitchen drawer says that life produces loose ends and that somebody expects to tie them. There is a pencil for sums, string for parcels, a candle stub for uncertain light, a thimble for pressure, buttons for the places that come undone. No grand speech is required. You can let the old drawer close softly now, though the story is not quite finished. Its wooden runners murmur, the china on the dresser stands pale in the evening, and the house rests around all the work completed without fanfare. Let us return once more to Eleanor, older now, seated in the same kitchen after many years. The room has changed in small ways. A chair has been replaced. The dresser bears new scratches. A photograph stands on the mantel. May visits with children of her own, bringing noise, crumbs, and a coat whose button has loosened. Eleanor's hands are not as quick as they were, but they still recognize the right tools. She opens the drawer. The tin emerges, and the children gather near. Its picture has faded almost entirely. To them, it has always been the button tin. They do not know what it originally held. The first life of the container has disappeared beneath the importance of the second. One child asks to play. Eleanor pours a selection into a shallow dish. Her rules are familiar. Keep them on the table, do not put them in the mouth, and return every one. The children begin arranging circles into flowers and faces. Meanwhile, May repairs the coat. The positions have shifted. The daughter sews. The mother watches. Neither remarks upon the change. Eleanor reaches into the tin and finds the large mottled button that once belonged to her own mother. She tells May this much, though the original garment remains uncertain. May turns it over and gives it back. "Keep that one," she says. So it stays. Years later, When the household is cleared or passed onward, the tin goes to May. Useful things are divided among family members. Some are kept, some are sold, some disappear. The button tin is easy to overlook, but May takes it because it is familiar. She places it in her own kitchen drawer. The action completes no dramatic circle. It is simply where she keeps buttons. That simplicity is the reason the habit lasts. It requires no display case, no written genealogy, and no special occasion. Memory lives beside scissors and string, where it can still be useful. A modern collector might examine the contents with a magnifying glass, identify materials, compare manufacturing methods, and date particular styles. This can be fascinating and valuable. Old buttons deserve such attention. But May values them differently. She knows which one fits a school coat. She knows which set came from her mother. She knows that the pearl buttons should not be given to the youngest child. She knows the tin will contain something useful if she searches long enough. Knowledge can be intimate without being academic. This channel's gentle history lives in that space, between the museum label and the remembered hand. The museum can tell us that buttons were made from shell, horn, bone, metal, glass, wood, vegetable ivory, and emerging plastics. Trade records and catalogues can show what was sold. Domestic manuals can explain sewing methods. Surviving garments reveal placement and fashion. Family memory tells us how the tin sounded. Both forms matter. Together they restore the kitchen as a place of intelligence, adaptation, and care. Not a sentimental stage where every woman was endlessly content, and not a place defined only by hardship. A real working room, full of fatigue, satisfaction, irritation, laughter, steam, crumbs, and decisions. The button tin belongs to that balanced reality. It was kept because buttons cost something, because matching was easier from a store at home, because garments were expected to last, because domestic repair was routine, because the kitchen was the center of practical life, and because useful objects were granted more than one chance. It was kept, too, because small things gather meaning when they remain near a family. An Edwardian woman may not have thought any of this while sliding the tin back into the drawer. She was thinking about supper, washing, school, weather, money, or the next task. Historical meaning often accumulates after the people involved have gone on with their day. The dignity is in the doing. A button is cut from worn cloth. It waits. Years pass. Another garment needs it. A woman finds the match, threads a needle, and makes the repair. The family leaves the house properly fastened. That is the entire event. And it is enough to illuminate a world. Today, we may not keep a button tin in the kitchen. Perhaps ours is a glass jar in the sewing room, a plastic box in a cupboard, or a small envelope that came with a coat. Perhaps we do not sew often at all. Yet many of us still hesitate before throwing away a perfectly good button. The hand pauses. This might be useful, we think. The instinct survives in other forms too. We keep spare gift ribbon, jars that fit a particular shelf, screws from dismantled furniture, a length of good string, a recipe written in a mother's hand, and fabric too lovely to discard. Some of these things are used. Some wait for years. Their presence says that a home is not merely a place of consumption, it is a place where objects are judged, remembered, adapted, and sometimes given another life. Modern care often looks different but feels familiar. We recharge a child's device before a journey, leave soup in the refrigerator for somebody coming home late, replace a loose screw in a pair of spectacles, or sew the toy rabbit's ear before bedtime. The tools have changed, but the small anticipatory gesture remains, noticing what will be needed and quietly making it ready. There is still a warm satisfaction in solving a problem with something already at hand. A missing button found in an old jar can make a cardigan wearable again. A coat repaired at the table can return to the hall hook instead of leaving the home. For a moment, the old Edwardian rhythm passes through our fingers, not as an obligation, but as recognition. And perhaps the most enduring parallel is the way care becomes embedded in ordinary objects. A button, sewn on by someone we love, may outlast the conversation held while it was done. A tin can preserve the sound of a grandmother's kitchen. A drawer can hold the memory of hands that never made a fuss about their skill. Tonight, the old house has grown quiet. The mending is finished, the buttons are back beneath their faded lid, and a coat hangs ready for morning beside the kitchen door. Thank you for spending this gentle time among the warm drawers, worn tables, and capable hands of the past. May the kettle's soft murmur fade into stillness around you, and may you rest as peacefully as the sleeping household beyond the stairs. Good night, and let the little tin keep watch until morning.